Hello, welcome to History in Lowell. I'm Maritza Grooms. Of course, I'm joined by my personal professor, Bob Forrant, and we have a very special guest for you today who you normally don't see but has been part of this show since its inception. Wendy Blom, our producer.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
We're so excited to have you on this side of the cameras as opposed to on the other side. What the people don't know is that there have been times where we have interns to help us, like today we have wonderful interns from LTC, but there have been times where you have been a one-woman show running the cameras, the audio, editing, everything. You are our master producer and you brought us all together.
Well, History in Lowell is really a work of love for me. We've been doing it for 8 years.
That is so wild.
Yeah.
8 years. It doesn't feel like it, huh, Bob?
No, I mean, you were a baby, so it's sort of like, what the heck happened here?
I know. I think we have it on a show where you distinctly told me I'm no longer a youth.
Yeah, that could be.
crossed
That
over.
could be. Yeah, I mean, I feel as you that this has been like a favorite thing that I've done over the years since we started, and always look forward to the half hour and thinking about what we're going to do, and then when I'm done, it's always like, oh, that was really good. I'm glad we did it. And I've recently gone back and looked at some of the old way back when programs to see if they still hold up, and they do. It's actually a pretty, even though I feel like I'm bragging in a way, we've done a pretty impressive body of work.
We have. It really goes the gamut of what's important here in Lowell.
And when we started, well, I guess even before we started in 2017, and the first episode was Black History in Lowell. And it wasn't meant to be a recurring program. It was just supposed to be a one-off that we were doing together where we learned about the Underground Railroad. We learned about Lowell's role in the slave trade and slavery and anti-slavery and abolition. But we also learned that the three of us had a lot of chemistry and we were working together. But before that, Wendy, you had caught me outside being a loud rabble rouser a few months before
I find that hard to believe.
Yes, well, I was the executive director and I was hired in 2016. And it was the summer of 2016 that the Black Lives Matter movement started up, and I thought it was so important to have the Black Lives Matter movement represented on the channels. And so there was also a lot of racial tension going on at the time between the police and the Black community, and I thought it was just a perfect thing for us to do and try to diffuse some of the tension. So we had a panel on, and with the police chief and a police captain and Maritza and her friend and fellow activist Masada Jones, and also Fru Kembeng, who was a leader in the African immigrant community. So that was a great 1 hour panel discussion, and we learned a lot.
Oh yeah.
And I learned that Maritza's very good on camera, and we got to know each other.
Thank you. I did not know how good I would be on camera. I just knew at the time this was important, and I felt honored to be present for such an important conversation and something that could be captured, right? That's the power of media, is that we're capturing these important moments in time. And we were having this conversation at the height of this Black Lives Matter movement that was moving throughout the country. And there were so many other things going on right here in Lowell. And I just remember being just so angry and just full of passion and just ready to speak truth to power. And honestly, you helped me find my voice in a way that I did not know was going to happen. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And here we are so many years later, but a few months after that, you invited me to two things. One, you invited me to join the board here at LTC, which also prompted a professional journey for me that I didn't know that's a moment in history for me. But that same day that you had invited me, I had just read this book, The Big Move, Immigrant Voices from a Mill City. And you know who put that together? This guy and his friend, Christoph Strobel. And I remember reading it and being like, wow, these are such impactful stories that need to be told. I'm so glad that I read it. I wish I could meet these guys. And then just a few days later, Wendy said, hey, you want to do a show with this guy?
So much serendipity.
I know, and boom, a star was born.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but I personally didn't know what to expect. I have been on camera before doing other things. I had, been to GBH and been on like, PBS NewsHour and stuff like that. And I always felt like that's like way up there, over there, whatever. And I liked coming here and being in a community setting and being part of talking about the place where I live. And so it felt better to me to be spending my time doing that. And I had, from teaching so many years at the university, I had learned a lot about Lowell history and like always wanted to tell stories. So I would tell them to my class, but that's like that's in a bit of a bubble. And by being able to do them here, it also magnified that story and what I knew. And I think to be a good history teacher, you have to be a storyteller. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of coming in a setting like this and figuring out, okay, you have X amount of time to tell a complicated thing, how do you do it? There's a art to it. It's not as easy as I think people might think it is. Right. And so again, I was grateful for all of that. I feel like I've become a better teacher over the years from the process, because I'm thinking in terms of, even though I'm rambling on now, I'm thinking in terms of conciseness and getting to the point and all of that. And so, yeah, I mean, when we were thinking about the show this time, I thought, okay, you have to come out from behind the glass because you're the architect. You are. I mean, there's no question in my mind that you're the architect of what we've been able to do over the years. And so, I mean, we even went and did a documentary.
Yes, an award-winning documentary.
An award-winning documentary on the abolitionist history of the city, out of, again, this sort of relationship that we've had. And we've had probably 100 guests from all different parts of the community, from park rangers to, people in immigrant and refugee communities, mm-hmm. to people who are heading up immigrant and refugee agencies and organizations, to just people doing research on who they are and how they got here. I mean, I feel like it's really, we've touched a lot of bases. When I was looking at, again, sort of looking at the channel the other day where all the shows are archived, and I was thinking, I wish there was a way to figure out how we could put them all together and make like mash them together and make a big documentary out of all of it.
Wow. Sounds like a lot of work coming up.
But it sounds like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking like Ken Burns is the one that gets all the ink and everybody's like, oh, Ken Burns. And I feel like when we started, at some point in the beginning we didn't so much, but I think at one point you said to me, do you have any images to go with this?
Right.
And then we started inserting more and more images, and then the shows in a way almost became mini documentaries by having half a dozen or so images in 25 minutes or 28 minutes of programming, and it made everything even better. Right, and that's what gave me this idea. Well, Ken Burns has got nothing on us except Ford, gives him $1 million a year to do documentaries, yeah. And we're working for free. So, but yeah. Anyway, I'll stop. That's enough rambling by me.
Well, I think it was so fortunate that technology and the show kind of came together, because it wasn't that long before the show started that there wasn't such a thing as YouTube channel.
Right.
And now all of our shows are archived, and you can look back, 8 years, right on the LTC YouTube page, and they're all in a playlist. We're very fortunate that LTC is willing to archive all of those shows.
Yeah, and it's so important, like that cross-section of public access in history. I feel like one of the things that became so important to me at the time, I was working in an out-of-school time program with teens and young tweens, and how do you get them interested in things that matter? And this was how I did. I would be like, oh, guys, I just learned the coolest thing last week with my professor. And so then I would show them these videos, and it was an informal and accessible way to teach them stuff that they had no idea was going on right in their own backyard. And a lot of people when we did that first episode, had no idea about the Underground Railroad here or Lowell's role in abolition. They had no clue. And we were able to bring that to life. And more things happened because of it. Other organizations popped up. Other people said, oh, we need to tell our stories too. We need to make sure that these stories are being told and brought forward. And who knew that just by us saying, hey, let's get together and do this one show.
Now there's a Black History Walk in Lowell and signs, historical markers and signs on Native American history, which was a topic we visited more than once here.
Yeah.
A set of historical markers on Little Canada and the urban renewal of that French-Canadian immigrant neighborhood. I mean, all these things have sort of come in a way out of it. The International Institute, we had people from that organization on here more than once talking about the history of their settling immigrants and refugees in Lowell, starting back in the early 20th century, all the way up until when they had their 100th anniversary party a few years ago in downtown Lowell at the auditorium, I mean, which was a really brilliant event. And so I think, again, we've been able to sort of do that. So I'll flip the switch a little, because usually you're asking me questions and you're telling me, like, you have to talk louder or something. So, but I'll ask you each. So why history? Why is it that you both care to keep doing this? Like, what is it? You weren't a history major,
No.
right? I'm not sure if you were or you were not. Sociology. Well, that's
Kinda
that's
close.
adjacent.
Yeah.
That's history adjacent.
It was urban sociology.
Okay,
too.
well, it's even more history adjacent. Okay,
Yeah.
You can be an honorary historian. So why? Like, why? What is it? Especially now, because I'm fearful that with everything going on now, from the White House, there have been so many cuts to the money that funds public history, that funds national parks, that funds the Smithsonian, that funds the National Archives, Mass Humanities, which is a really important organization in Massachusetts, has had most of its budget that it receives from the federal government done away with. And so, more so than ever, history is important. So why does it resonate with the both of you?
Well, I can start and just say that history just permeates the atmosphere of Lowell. Mm-hmm. And if you are going to, as I wanted to, make LTC very much embedded in the community, in the ultra-local community, then history is just essential, because all of the people that are here, all the different nationalities, need to know their history of how they got here and why, and their experience here, and it's not necessarily easily found out. So history is Lowell, really. I mean, public access should explore the history, the politics, the issues, the people that reside in the town.
Oh, I love that. I agree. I did it for the fame. No.
Well, you got recognized on the train going to Boston.
I did, and I got to have like a really deep conversation a couple of times actually, and talk about those episodes and why. And I even got picked up by my alma mater to be able to teach some of Lowell's history, which I got to live out my dream of being a professor. Short time, but I got to do it. But no, like, well, for one, like you said, Bob, being a history teacher, you have to be a good storyteller, and you are one of the best storytellers I've ever met, maybe the best. I have a voracious appetite for learning, and at the time that we were in 2016, I just wanted to understand, why is it like this? How did we get here? And the more I asked questions, the farther back I would go, and then I would come back forward, and then I would go back again, and I would see where we are. And then we started doing this show. I kept thinking, wow, I know we're not supposed to make too many correlations, but it definitely rhymes. And I saw Lowell as this microcosm of what was happening on the national stage at every juncture. Are we being antagonistic towards immigrants? Yep, and guess what's happening on the national stage? We have anti-immigration bills closing, the border bills, all these things. And I'm like, what? That's crazy. Segregation is a hot topic. What's going on in Lowell? Segregation is a hot topic. What is happening is always being reflected right here. Yeah. And then you gave me new eyes. I would be looking around and I'd be asking, who's not in the room? Why aren't they in the room? Whose story isn't being told? and it just made me want to learn more. And so history is endless. We just keep finding new things. Even you were finding new things, Bob. And then we'd be like, oh, we have to talk about this on the show. We have to bring more people in. We have to let people know this is what's happening. So I think now, as we're seeing things play out on the national stage, where people are banning books, they're banning identities, they're everything that's happening that is so dire, that is really scarily, like I said, it rhymes, 100 years ago, it's because people just don't know. And that's one thing I found, that if you know the history and you're able to give people an answer to the why and just have a conversation with somebody, it can change their mind completely.
Yeah, it's a step toward changing. I worry, like in my history class the other day, I talked about being a student in the late 1960s, and I was a student at Northeastern University. And we were, as a group of students, particularly the history majors, but lots of students, were pushing the university to teach Black history because there were no African American history courses. There were no women's history courses. It was just a very traditional, and it wasn't just Northeastern. That's pretty much that was pretty much the norm. And we were making demands against the institution and organizing ourselves and being righteously indignant about what we were not receiving as an education. And to the university's credit, they changed and they hired an instructor in African American history, and it was this transformative moment for me because we were using this textbook written by John Hope Franklin, a world-class historian, and he wrote a history of African Americans. It was like a textbook, and we were using it as the textbook. And the teacher didn't tell us, but one day when we came into class, we walked in, and there's this very tall, very dignified Black man standing in front of the class, and it's John Hope Franklin.
So cool.
And it was like, okay. Like for me, again, it was like, okay, I want to do this. Like I can't be him. That's impossible. He was probably one, if not the best, one of the best. He's passed away, so I can't give him a big head. But he was extraordinary in terms of what he contributed. And now I think about all those years later. We're talking about 50 some odd years later. We're fighting to try to keep it in the curriculum, because some people want to take it out. And it just, again, I worry, that's why I'm curious, like why people, I always ask people, why you care about history? Because I'm trying to figure out, like, what's the response when somebody at the highest level you want to, like the African American History Museum, which was a long time coming in the United States and only has been open for a few years, they want to close it.
What?
Yes.
Well, I was just thinking, sometimes learning about history makes you feel better because you see terrible things happening and then things have evolved. For example, all of the raids on immigrants happened back during Wilson, and then things evolved. So maybe we can see some sort of hope.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one again, sort of like as we're winding down the semester, we're having these more philosophical conversations in class, and one of my students said, "Don't you wish?" This was a question to me. Don't you wish sometimes you didn't know everything you know? And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, it's like you have all this, like in your head, of all these terrible things that have happened." And I answered by saying, yes, but I also have all these other movements. And so when we do the show and we have people on who talk about the struggle, but then talk about the, how much better their kids are doing, and, escaping, a genocide, or living in a refugee camp for 8 years and then ending up in Lowell and starting a business, or, things like that. I say, well, that's like, to your point, the other side of the coin. And then I can say, yes, we can. But if we don't know that history, that's what worries me now, that if we dead end the stories and make it seem like everything has always been okay, then, you know, in 30 or 40 years, what have we done?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so to talk about closing the African American History Museum, I mean, there's one of the websites that goes with it is about the Underground Railroad, and they removed Harriet Tubman from the website and her quotes. And then because people got so riled up, they put them back.
Yeah.
They removed Jackie Robinson, who integrates baseball, right? They removed his story from the website, but then because people got upset.
I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle, really. You know, we all know this stuff.
Yes,
Right.
that's the way I think about it.
Exactly.
Just because you like
Yeah.
excise it from the book doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and they don't have control over what people talk about or read. They're not banning books yet.
They're
Well,
trying.
in some places.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Florida, there are definitely textbooks that are disappearing. The Naval Academy
Oh gosh.
purged the libraries at the directive of the Defense Secretary, and they basically eliminated like all the books by people like Maya Angelou from the Naval Academy library, any books that dealt with race
Oh my gosh.
and ethnicity, and they kept Hitler's Mein Kampf. So there you go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and that's the Naval Academy where,
Oh my
right,
gosh.
people are supposed to, at this highest level, at this highest plane, be prepared to defend the Constitution.
Right.
And their library is being purged of black authors.
Oh my gosh. But
It's-
see, to that point, that this show gives me a sense of urgency that
Yes.
we have to do it as long as we can keep you.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
You know, and it
right now
is-
I'm good to go.
Yeah, thankfully. You know, it is about, I think our show, we tell the truth, we uplift stories that aren't normally told, we tell as many underrepresented stories as we possibly can think of, and we ask and implore that if we're missing any gaps, people fill those in for us and come and talk on the show. But one aspect that I really love is that we always try to end on a message of hope. We do try to always emphasize that community aspect, that it's
Yep.
always people who are not necessarily in positions of power, who are not necessarily in the most powerful group, that they recognize their actual power, the people power, that they recognize themselves in these stories, that, you know, sometimes it's children, sometimes it's people who don't even speak the same language, and they're banding together and singing together because they're challenging the powers that be. And so that's yeah, to both of your points,
Yeah.
that's why we have to do it. That's why the show became such an imperative for me.
And thank goodness there is such a thing as public access TV, because a lot of places don't have it at all. In the South, it doesn't exist.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know
No,
that.
no. Massachusetts
Because
is
they didn't
unusual.
opt in, is that
Yeah.
why?
Yeah. Well, they don't even have government channels down there, so
Oh my
their
gosh.
meetings are not broadcast.
Wow.
They don't want them broadcast.
Of course not.
Yeah, so we're fortunate here in Massachusetts, but we're still lucky to have public access.
Yeah, and I think our show, well, in my mind, it gets picked up all over. I know it gets played in Cambridge, but that's still just Massachusetts, at least. But you know, if we can keep telling these stories, you never know who's going to pick this up. You never know. Some people have told me they listen to this like a podcast and tell other people about it. You just never know who's going to hear this at the right moment and think, I need to start something like this in my town. I need to do some kind of community group where we just talk about the history of our town or the history of our space in the context of this greater nation, and why this is happening, why it got this way, and what we as people can do about it. And I think that's the hope. We never know who's watching the show.
Yeah,
We really
I mean, and
never know.
especially we're coming up on 250th birthday party for the country, and Lord knows how that will be spun at the highest levels. We're also coming up on the 200th anniversary of the founding of Lowell in 2026, and so like how that story will be played out over the year, like what stories will be told, what kind of history will what kind of conversations will there be? That becomes another interesting plot line, I guess, to think about, right? That in 2026, we have both of these grand historical markers, one at the local level, one obviously at the national level, So we'll have plenty of material
Yeah.
going forward as both of these things, play out, and we juxtapose the local with the national and how we think about our 200th as a city and the 250th as a nation. So stay tuned, folks.
Are you going to be able to do that in a half hour?
We'll have to do multiple half hours.
Series.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we can do many half hours. It would be, I mean, there are a lot of, people local people that could come on and talk about different aspects of that history over the couple hundred years. But just go back to 1826, sort of think about what was here then, what's here now. I think it'll be really interesting to sort of blend the two, right? The national, again, as you were saying earlier, like whatever happened on the national stage, there's some aspect of it in Lowell.
Yeah.
6 degrees of whatever that's called, Kevin Bacon or something. But so 6 degrees of Lowell, right? I mean, so I think everything that's happening that they'll be talking about at the 250 level, there's a Lowell story to squeeze in there somewhere.
Oh, I love that. And this is how our planning meetings go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really just us talking after the show. That was so great. If we do say so ourselves, what do we talk about next?
Yeah.
But there's so much to talk about constantly. And, we're about to wrap, which is how the show usually goes. We get into such great conversation and then the time just flies. But Wendy and Bob, while I have you here and we've got the cameras rolling, I want to thank both of you for the tremendous impact that you've had on my life. I'm not going to get emotional. I can feel it happening. I am getting emotional. But honestly, if this show never happened, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have the extensive collection of books that I have. And I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I'm definitely a better person because of the two of you. And I feel empowered, I feel smarter, I feel like I ask better questions, I feel like I care deeper about the community that I'm in and the people that I'm around because the two of you said, hey, let's do this. And then you said, yeah, let's do it again. So thank you both.
Well, thank you so much, Maritza, for keeping this going, and Robert for keeping this going. And it's a lot of work, and you guys have really put so much time and love into it. Thank you.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
It's definitely work, but it's fun. I always look forward to it.
Me too.
I can honestly say.
Yeah. So much love, and so much love to you, our viewers. We couldn't do it without you. Well, we probably could, but please keep watching. This has been History in Lowell. Thank you for tuning in.